Hello, Sooner Nation, OU Insider subscribers, Coach Brian Clinton enthusiasts, Brujo enthusiasts. That's my band, Brujo. Shameless plug, dissenters.
I need one of those T-shirts.
All right, let me get you one.
Need one.
Our drummer Alex put this or made this for me. He also made the logo.
Love that.
He's great at stuff like that. People who don't like me talking about my band. This might be the podcast for you. It probably is. This is another episode of The Oklahoma Drill, a podcast fueled by OU Insider and the Rivals Network. My name is Jesse Crittenden, and I am joined, as always, through thick and thin, because this is a marriage, basically. I know you're actually married, but this is your second marriage. Brian Clinton. Brian, you need one of these shirts? I can get you one.
I need one. Yep, I want one.
Okay. We have so much to talk about. We actually have a game. We have an Oklahoma game to actually analyze. We have another game on the horizon in just a few days to talk about. So we have a plenty of stuff to break down. But before we do that, another reminder that as important as Oklahoma football is and always feels like it is, I mean, hell, it's our job. Yeah. Sports, hey, never let anyone tell you sports don't matter, because they do. But absolutely, some things are always more important than sports, than Oklahoma football. And Brian, we didn't talk last week about everything that's going on with you and your family and your little boy Bennett. We didn't talk about that last week, and I know there's people who are following along with your Facebook post, with your wife Taylor's Facebook post. But before we get into the less meaningful stuff, I know people out there want to know what's going on with you. So if you wanted to give a little update in terms of what the last few days have looked like.
Yeah. We're approaching a month in the NICU. It's been a long time spending time away from the wife. We've been sleeping opposite. It's been one of us at home here with Blakely and the other at the hospital with Bennett. So that's been tough on us. But Bennett he's hanging in there. He made lots of progress first few weeks. First 7 or 10 days or so of his life was it was pretty scary. And then going into Saturday, things were pretty consistent. Something happened Saturday. We're not really sure what it was at this point, but he started to struggle a little bit more on breathing, was more labored, and had to go back on a high flow machine. And so he's back on that as of right now. Current updates are he's still stable. He's still doing well. Still able to take bottles and things like that, which is just fantastic. But it sounds like it could be a little while longer before we get to go home. We're going to do some steroid. We're going to do potentially some genetic testing. If that doesn't work, we could end up as far as Houston or Dallas. Don't know that that's going to happen just yet, though. We're really praying that the steroid takes. And so, I'll show this. My wife will see this when she gets home, but that's little Bennett, and he's fighting, man. He's fighting. He's doing a good job, and so proud of him, and ready to get him home. But yeah, things are hanging in there, and I want to just thank everybody so much for the thoughts and prayers. I mean, it's just been overwhelming to see and feel the outreach from the people around us. So including you guys, Jesse. Really appreciate everything that's happened, and the OU Insider team and everybody in the Sooner Nation has just been fabulous. So really appreciate you guys.
Well, and we know obviously you've had to step away slightly from some of your day-to-day responsibilities as obviously this all takes precedence. But the fact that you were still at the game on Saturday to help provide content to OU Insider and OU fans, the fact that you're still doing the pod, I mean, the work ethic is incredible from you, and that's why it doesn't surprise me at all that Bennett's already proven to be a fighter. Seems like it's in the family and genetics. And I know, like you said, a lot of people out there have been showing their support. And I know you said it, and I'll say it. We really appreciate everybody out there that's sending thoughts and prayers. And you know what? I'll just say, look, Houston's coming to town on Saturday. So you guys, look, let's hope, you guys don't have to go to Houston. Houston's coming here.
That's right. That's
right.
right. Yep, that's right.
So, I mean,
that's all the Houston we're going to see.
That's right. Yeah. Hey,
into existence.
That's more than enough Houston.
Yeah.
More than enough Houston.
I agree.
Brian, it's speaking of that though. Look, we've had a few days to parse through Oklahoma's 51-3 win over Temple on Friday night, a game that OU expectedly won handedly, with some good things and also some things to break down, maybe some negatives or some concerns, questions. And I think one of those things that we should talk about is the offensive line, because Parker and I did quick slants yesterday and uploaded yesterday. We didn't really get into the offensive line, and you're the offensive line guy for one, which is another reason why it's good that you're here. People don't want to hear me talk. They want to hear you talk, and they probably want to hear us talk about the offensive line. And look, we didn't really talk about what we're going to get into. But I think it's just good to talk about the offensive line because look, it wasn't a great showing for the offense as a whole. There were good moments, but it wasn't an exceedingly dominant performance. And I think the bulk of fans' concerns starts at the offensive line. And there's a lot of things that we could get into, but I think before we do anything, I think the first thing to note again is that Jake Taylor didn't play.
Yep.
He's expected to play, and when he's healthy, he's probably one of your starting tackles. So him not being available is a big deal. The other thing is obviously that Branson Hickman got hurt after, I think he played 10 snaps on Friday, I think. 10 snaps. Starting center, 10 snaps, out with a high ankle sprain. Brent said he looked great. Brent Venable said he looked great in Monday's practice, but I would say his availability is, at best, it's probably 50-50. And look, this offensive line group isn't whole, but there's no denying that. I mean, look, OU gave up 3 sacks.
Yeah,
they gave up 1 sack through the first 3 games last season. I mean, Temple is, I mean, they're an FBS team in name only. If anybody watched that game on Friday, you'll see that OU played like an overall, like a C+ game, maybe.
Yeah.
And won by 48. So I'll turn it over to you though. There were some overarching themes, but I'll turn it to you. What stood out to you about the offensive line group? What's your concern level? What are the couple of things that have stood out?
The first thing that stood out was it seemed, and it's such a small sample size, but when you go back and watch the first 10 snaps of the game when Hickman was in there, the group seemed a lot more calm, I guess. Like more, there was it was more organized is probably the better way of putting it. Like you kind of felt like guys knew what they were doing or knew where they were supposed to be. It just almost felt like there was more assuredness. They were more sure about what they should have been doing, which was what you would expect. I mean, again, you've got a guy that started 30+ games at SMU, knows the ins and outs. I mean, offenses for the most part, the terminology is going to be different everywhere you go, but offenses for the most part, a lot of what you see around college football is going to be the same. And so I think with him in there, you were a lot more confident if you're the guys to the left and right of him. Garen Hatchett came in and did a good job. You didn't have any problems with snaps, which is like the first thing that you need from the center. But candidly, it was a step down at center. I mean, and we know he's not fully healthy. I've got to credit Gabe Ikard, who could be an offensive coach if he wanted to be. I mean, I know he has no desire to do that, but does a really good job breaking things down over on his podcast there with Teddy, and does some good stuff for the university during the game. But he kind of pointed to some of the issues that Garen Hatchett's had with his arm, whatever's going on there. I think that's going to limit him. But really, at the end of the day, I think what you can take away from this is very limited because, as you said, we don't really know what this offensive line looks like with Jake Taylor in it. Troy Everett is close to coming back, it sounds
Hmm.
like.
Glad you mentioned him.
Which that's another big addition. Somebody that's played the position and knows exactly what Bill Bedenbaugh wants from them. But the fact that when Hickman went out and pretty much everybody on the entire offensive line changed
Had to
positions
shift.
on the left side in
Yeah.
particular. I mean, that should tell you pretty much everything you need to know. That's an important spot. And so I think when you get Hickman back will be the good thing. It's concerning. My concern level after the first game from 1 to 10 is probably like a 6.5 or a 7. Like I think Temple getting 3 sacks, not a good look.
And it wasn't just the sacks. They got pressure a lot of the game.
And most of the time, the running lanes just weren't there. Like it's just you had a couple of good plays throughout, and a lot of it was RPO. And I do expect some, and that's the other thing. It's kind of threefold, right? Like on how much can you really take from this? Because I don't know if Oklahoma even knows what schemes it's going to be best with in the run game. We have they've got just 4 quarters of film to really go off of, and you changed guys pretty much throughout the game. So yeah, it's concerning. You don't want to see Jackson Arnold being pressured from Temple, especially when you've got defensive lines like Tennessee coming up in just a couple of weeks. So yeah, things have to improve in a big way, and at least this is how it was in at the high school level, and I agree. I would almost say this is the same pretty much at any level, but when you have a team, uh, most of the time their biggest improvements come between week 1 and week 2 because you have a lot of film to go off of, and you just learn more about yourself from game film. You just do. Um, the adrenaline's going. It's in front of 80,000, and so if things are going to improve, it's going to happen this week. If it doesn't, if we're talking the same way that we were, if we're talking next week the same way that we are right now about this offensive line, it's a concern because there are much better defensive lines and front sevens coming up. And perhaps one of the best of them you're going to see all season is just in a couple of weeks. So um, things have to get better. Definitely concerned, but not exactly hitting the panic button just yet.
I think there's a lot of good stuff in there. I think my overall takeaway is that this is just, I think is the offense as a whole has things to figure out. And the biggest thing is the offensive line. And I'm glad you mentioned there was a lot of shifting once Branson Hickman went out, because to me that screams they're still trying to figure stuff out. They don't have all of the answers to everything. Yeah. And it's not just Jake Taylor being out. It's like you mentioned, Troy Everett being out might end up actually, I mean, him being back, even if he's not a starter, might be huge for this team. I mean, he really might be. And I'm not saying anything we don't all necessarily know. I think it's hard to really evaluate it because I don't think they know exactly who their starting five is when everybody's healthy yet. And I mean, look, even as I kind of suspected, Jacob Sexton's listed at the top of the depth chart at left guard in the depth. I mean, to going into the game. And then where does he start the game? Left tackle.
Yep.
And then Branson Hickman goes out and he shifts to left guard. Michael Tarquin comes in at left tackle. I think the reality is we saw, I mean, Brent Venables said, they would love to have more depth and more of a rotation this year than they did last year. I don't know how feasible that is. I mean, you look at a couple of names, and I think Spencer Brown in particular drew the ire of some. I agree with I think Gabe was one of the guys that said it that I went back and watched the game. I don't think it was quite as bad as I thought it was when I was watching it live.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Spencer Brown was the guy watching it live. I was like, oh boy, it's not great. I don't think it was like horrible, horrible, horrible. I just thought it was bad after rewatching the game. But it wasn't just the 3 sacks. Temple got pressure a lot of the game. Arnold did not have a ton of time to throw. And that's like all of that being said, that it's clear that they have things to figure out. It's clear that they need to get healthy. And it's clear that Bill Bedenbaugh offensive lines, we've seen it time and time again, that there's usually a difference in how they play the second half of the year compared to the first half of the year.
Yep.
All of that being said, was it the performance you'd want to see against Temple, regardless, even with the injuries? I mean, that Temple D line is, I mean, the Temple team as a whole, one of the most unimpressive I've ever seen.
Yep.
You would have liked to have seen them be better. And look, Houston's not much better. Houston's better than Temple because that's an incredibly low bar.
Just
but this
from
is
an athletic standpoint.
Yeah. And this is a Big 12 team. But this is a Houston team that just got beat 27-7 against UNLV.
Yep.
So it's going to be noteworthy in the sense that that Houston is better than Temple by default, but not much better. So my concern would be they need to come out and be dominant.
Correct.
Regardless if Hickman comes back or not, because Jake Taylor's going to play. We'll see about where both Hickman and Troy Everett are. Brent didn't say for sure whether they'll be back, but this is a game the offensive line should dominate. And the reality is Tulane is going to be a step up, major step up from both of these teams.
Yeah.
And then, which we'll learn more about Tulane this weekend because they play against Kansas State, which I actually think is one of the most under the radar, interesting games.
Yes, it is.
Of week 2.
Tulane's 2-0 against Kansas State all time.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact.
I didn't know that. And look, I think we all see Kansas State as a team that can win the Big 12.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think Kansas State will win, but my guess is I think Tulane will make it competitive.
Yeah.
And I think it'll show that, I mean, we've all got our sights on the SEC schedule and Tennessee coming in week 4 to open the conference. But like Tulane's no slouch.
No,
I don't think.
Yeah, I would agree. And I mean, Tulane is going to be I don't know if they are the favorite. I think they might be the favorite or the co-favorite to win the American, right? I think so. And of course, UNLV, who just got done playing Houston, they're right there with Boise State to win the Mountain West. So, they're not. This is not this Houston team coming in. The Willie Fritz team that came into Norman a few years ago, Tulane, and almost beat Oklahoma. I mean, we saw what they turned into. That team ended up being really stinking good. They beat USC in the Cotton Bowl. They do? They went 24-4 over the last 2 years. So he does have some success under his belt, but this team that he's bringing into Norman this year is a step down. He's got quite a rebuild on his hands. I was honestly surprised that it was as bad as it was last week for them. I thought UNLV was going to be tough because of what they brought back, but I also thought that them losing their quarterback to USC was going to make that a game that Houston could win, and they just didn't show up at all. So, it's Oklahoma should be able to establish the run. And if they can, it's a major concern. So, I do think this is the last game that you kind of get a chance to really iron things out, because Tulane can come in to Norman and give you problems. They can. If you don't have the offensive line in place, if your quarterback's having to run around for his life, if the running game's not where it wants, if you don't find guys that wide receiver position because you've lost your top 3 for a little while, it looks like, or at least your top two of your top three, if Nick Anderson is able to come back. Um, yeah, I mean, that game could be dicey. And then there are no rests after that. I mean, you go right into Tennessee, and then you're at Auburn, you get a bye week, and then it's time for Texas. Like it things get tougher, much tougher after this week. And so, yeah, there needs to be a lot of questions answered up front for Oklahoma. And it's gonna. I do think the one thing we need to say on this before we move on to the next topic is if it is Garen Hatchett at center again, while while he may be limited as to what he can do physically, I think if they are going into this week with that being the mindset, um, you're better prepared. Like you don't have to make the switch after the first
That's
10 snaps.
that's
So
fair.
that does play a big role in it. And I think, you know, knowing what you've got going into a game obviously is going to change the game plan a lot. So we'll see. And I'm sure there's going to be some adjustments from what we saw last week. There always is. This is when you're going to find out who you are. And it's a big week.
And depending, the last thing I'll say is depending on if Hickman plays or not, especially which Garen Hatch is not healthy. He wouldn't talk about his arm at all when we talked to him on Monday night. He shrugged off the question, but it's like it's clear Garen Hatchett's not fully healthy.
Yeah.
I'd be curious, especially if Hickman doesn't play. I would be curious to see not only what the combinations of guys up front looks like, but I'd be curious to see if I don't know, does someone like Eddie Pierre-Louis get a little bit more run
God, I can't wait until
at guard? Yeah, I don't know.
If if there's a guy on this team that I have like a man crush on, Eddie Pierre-Louis is going to be. I'm telling you, man, he's got the juice. That guy is going to be special if he locks in and takes everything that Bill Bedenbaugh says and runs with it. That guy could be special.
My man crush was Jaden Gibson. Rest in peace. He didn't actually die, but he's just not playing. Sorry, I should specify. Okay, but you said and I think going under the umbrella of the offense has things to figure out as a whole. I think basically the toughest thing or the worst thing that could have happened to this offense in a year where obviously you're playing in the SEC, you've got things to figure out pretty much at every position group almost. The worst thing that could happen is that there's injuries. And now you look at not just the offensive line, but you look at the wide receiver room, and all of a sudden you're out Jalil Farouk, which if people didn't, yes, it's Temple. Yes, it's Temple. But if you didn't notice from that Jalil Farouk 47-yard connection on the first series that OU needs Jalil Farouk, I mean, they need him, and his absence hurts a lot. Not only just because you don't have Jaden Gibson, but now you don't have your senior veteran institutional guy that kind of provides something that the other guys in this room don't. And so, I mean, it was a fine day for Jackson Arnold throwing the ball. It was fine. But this offense had 275 yards going into the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
I mean, this offense averaged 4 yards a carry in the first half, which is like below fine, especially against a Temple offense or a Temple defense that is nothing. So like, yes, the playbook and the play calling was they acknowledged as vanilla, sure, but like I don't think you can really afford to do that this weekend, even against Houston. I think you've got to play, and I think you have to treat this like you're trying to figure out answers. I think they got to play this game like they're trying to find answers to questions this weekend.
Correct.
And to me, that starts not just the offensive line, but the wide receiver room, because we'll see if Nick Anderson's back. Again, Brent Venables didn't specify. He said sooner rather than later. That could mean he's back this weekend and he's full go. That can mean he's back this weekend and he's limited. That can mean he's not back this weekend. But even if he is back, you've got to figure some stuff out, because Deion Burks was awesome last weekend, but even in a blowout win, he played 56 of 67 snaps.
Yeah.
OU couldn't afford to take him off the field.
Right.
He was basically their offense.
Yeah.
You need to figure out other guys. And they played a bunch of different guys. Look, I mean, Zion Reagan's got some time. Ivan Carrion got some time. Zion Kearney got some time. Brennan Thompson played a bunch of snaps. JJ Hester played a ton of snaps and then kind of didn't do anything with them. That's
If he catches those two balls, the entire offensive output looks totally
a lot
different.
different.
Which hurts. I mean, I don't want to just bash on the guy, but yeah, you catch those two balls, the one over the middle, he's got room to run, and the other one's likely a touchdown. And a long one at that. So it makes a big difference. Yeah,
It, it does. And so I'm wondering what they do at wide receiver
yes,
because I mean, regardless if Nick Anderson comes back or not, you've got to replace Jalil Farouk. And even Angelo Anthony, who got some time Friday, he doesn't look fully healthy yet.
right.
You would think he's probably a replacement, right? But I mean, you look at this other list of guys, they're going to need someone from this group of Hester, Jacquez Petaway, Reagan's Carrion, Kearney. They're going to need somebody else from that group to
Mhm.
play like a lot of snaps.
Yes.
So I wonder, is Petaway the answer? Because look, those he doesn't offer size or a ton of size compared to some of the other guys in that group, but there's been buzz that he can play inside and outside, and that part is key because Dion Burks has the slot position down.
Yes.
I mean, he's going to play 90% of the snaps,
Yep.
if not more. And I mean, look, like Brennan Thompson didn't do anything that stand out. Not to say that he can't or won't. I'm just like, to me, it almost is like an open competition for
Oh
between that
yeah.
other group. Is Petaway the guy there, you think? Or is there somebody else that could emerge, should emerge?
Yeah. I think right now, as far as who's healthy or healthy-ish available, I probably is the best way of putting it. Like I think your top three is pretty clear. Well, it
Given the
was.
injuries. Yeah.
Yeah, given the injuries, your top three, I mean, I would say Nick Anderson and Dion Burks are 1A, 1B. And then your argument there for the third receiver would be either Brennan Thompson or Andrew Anthony once he gets up to speed. Like those are your probably your big guys. But in this offense, where there's predominantly three wide receivers on the field at all times, you're going to have more guys that can can come in. And I think Zion Kearney is an interesting name. But Petaway came in and had so much hype, I guess, or so much like there was instantly like a some expectations there last year. I remember when it ended up getting called back for something. I think it was an illegal forward pass or something, but they handed the ball off to, or they did a reverse on a kickoff return against Texas. And when he had the ball in his hand and was flying down the field, and it ended up being a pretty decent gain, it was just like, okay, like they're finding ways to get this guy the ball because he is a special athlete. And then we didn't really see a whole lot from him after that point. And so if he is able to get on the field, I think that's a guy that you have to find a way to get the football because he is a special athlete and somebody that you want to get the ball in their hands. But the problem with that is I don't want to say one trick pony because you have like three guys that fit that mold if you put him out there. Petaway falls in the same mold as Brennan Thompson and Dion Burks in my mind. And I think Dion Burks is the best option of those three, at least right now. And so that's tough. It's a tough spot. I think why Kearney was the first guy that comes to mind for me is he has prototype size. He still has the speed that you want. He's got the ball skills that you want. And that's a guy that could grow into a possession wide receiver, somebody that you can really trust to get the ball to on third down, somebody who's got strong hands and a good catch radius. So yeah, I think somebody in that room is going to have to really step up. But the good news is, outside of Bill Bedenbaugh on the offensive side of the ball, I think what Emmett Jones has done to that room. Actually, I'll just go as far as to say this: what Emmett Jones has done to that room since he arrived in Norman has been the most impressive turnaround on the offensive side of the ball, and maybe outside of linebackers with Brent Venables in the defensive line, like that's probably the most impressive what he has done, the amount of playmakers he's brought into that room. So they'll figure it out, and they'll find ways of getting playmakers out there. But it'll be interesting to see what that combination looks like when the games start to get tougher.
I feel pretty comfortable saying that I think of that group of three freshman receivers, on Reagans, Kearney. One of them's not redshirting at minimum.
Yeah,
one of them.
yeah, absolutely.
And I would have said going into the year, before the Jaden Gibson injury, before the Jalil Farouk injury, I was going to guess that all three would redshirt just because OU wasn't going to need them.
Right.
One of them they're going to need to play more than 4 games.
Oh yeah.
It's just
and that might be lowballing it.
Yeah, that's what, like, at
Honestly.
least. Yeah. And I don't mean to say that as like a super hot take or a bold take, but like they're going to need one of those guys.
Yeah.
Even if it's 10 snaps a game, 12 snaps a game, 15 snaps a game. They're going to need one of those guys. And
Agreed.
so, and then I think the other obvious answer is they need Angelo Anthony healthy now, bad. They need him bad.
Yeah.
And
something that does
he played 8 snaps on Friday.
And I think they'll bring him along, as he gains more confidence in that knee, he'll be better off. But one of the bright spots, one of the things that does help with this, was the emergence of Bauer Sharp. Like,
yeah,
I think that is going to be huge. Like,
I love the 12 personnel.
Oh, dude. Like, yeah,
loved it.
Chef's kiss. Like, whenever I saw two tight ends tried out on the field, I was like, oh yes, this is finally they have the personnel to be able to switch things up, because it's so easy if you stay in 11 personnel all the time. Like, for a defense, that's just so easy. Like, you keep you get to keep rotating the same guys out, but you throw 2 tight ends in there, especially one that's an inline guy, like Jake Roberts. It makes things a little more difficult.
Well, in the Bauer touchdown, that was the Jake Roberts in motion, goes out into the flat, and it's Bauer over the top. Just good old fashioned football, right there.
Gorgeous.
Yeah. I think the other thing too, and this isn't as much of a dire question, it's more of a curiosity thing. I'm a lot more curious about that running back room than I was heading into Temple. A lot more curious, because I mean, from an explosiveness standpoint, I thought Taylor Tatum looked like the best running back on the field.
Yeah, he did.
And I also thought Javante Barnes looked really good.
Agreed.
I thought Barnes looked good. And again, like, it's hard to know because it's just Temple, and OU won by 48. They sleptwalked to a 48-point win. Yep. But Gavin Sawchuk plays 26 snaps. Javante Barnes plays 19. Taylor Tatum plays 18. Taylor Tatum was the second running back on the field. He was the starter for the second series. We even saw early in the first quarter, it's Barnes and Tatum on the field at the same time. And Taylor Tatum looked like the best running back to me. Yes, it's week 1. We saw what happened last year. The running back room was a mess. And then Gavin Sawchuk comes in and blows it all away.
Yeah.
A lot can change. All of a sudden, I'm a little curious about if that running back room if snaps are still up for grabs a little bit, and if Tatum can play a role, because not only did Tatum, he averaged 14 yards a carry. He had the 35-yard chunk play in the fourth. He had the 19-yard chunk play. His 8-yard touchdown was the only rushing touchdown for OU. It was also the only third down conversion for OU in the entire game. They had missed their first 11 attempts before that Tatum touchdown, and it was a 3rd and 8.
Yeah.
It was an 8 yards out. It was 3rd and goal. I just wonder, again, I'm not putting too much into it, but I wonder if there's a little bit more room for movement in that running back room than I thought there was going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And Brent Venables said on yesterday, that Tatum has done well with his opportunities and is going to earn more. I'm not saying I didn't think Taylor Tatum wasn't going to play this year, but holy cow, could he play like a real role for this
Oh yeah.
offense?
Oh
I think
yeah.
he could.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
That's your guy, also.
Yeah, man. I've been on the Taylor Tatum train since I started looking into some of his film for some of the previews on him. He's got it all. He's got the tools, man. Like there are, it's at a place like Oklahoma where running back has been at a premium over the years. Like he's got as good a tools as some of those guys that we've seen. And that's like incredibly high praise for somebody that we've only seen in one game, but it, it translates. Like some of the things that we saw from him in high school, like they translate. They do a good job. He does a good job of it still. I think really what's going to predicate how that running back room ends up playing out is what does Oklahoma feel confident in running? Like what are the schemes that they end up making their bread and butter for the year? Like if it's that counterplay that we saw them use so often, like for forever, uh, versus is it zone? Do they find out that they're better running gap scheme stuff like that? That's all going to help decide who is your best guy. Like if you're running outside zone all the time, your best options are probably Gavin Sawchuk and Taylor Tatum. Like they have that foot in the ground speed and can make one cut and go. If it's between the tackles, it's probably going to be Javonte Barnes. But again, Tatum can play that role too because he has the size. So um, I would say I feel more confident right now about Tatum playing a big role in this offense because if his opportunities are only going to continue to increase, he is the most well-rounded running back that they have. Just from an athletic standpoint, like he has the tools to do pretty much anything you ask him to. Um, but Javonte Barnes, you said it. He looked a lot more like the guy we saw against Florida State a couple of years. Speaking of Florida State, but
Yeah.
yeah, Javonte Barnes looked a lot more like the guy people were excited about coming into next year, and that bodes well. I think right now the pressure's on Gavin Sawchuk
Yeah.
because it's been his room. Like that's kind of been the thought. But with DeMarco Murray coming back to the sidelines this week, um, it'll be interesting to see who trots out there because I do think Tatum is going to force them to have to give him more opportunities.
The other thing to mention too is, I mean, pass blocking could end up being a major factor in who sees a ton of snaps,
Yeah.
especially as the offensive line's trying to figure stuff
Great
out.
point. Great point.
Because I was looking at the Pro Football Focus grades, and again, Pro Football Focus is never gospel when it comes to grades, at least, and especially not after a 48-point win against a really bad Temple team. Having said that, so Taylor Tatum expectedly had the best performance grade, 69.1, which is good.
Nice.
Javonte Barnes right behind him at 68.8. Then a bit of a dip to Gavin Sawchuk at 57.6. I think it's noticeable. So Taylor Tatum didn't get a pass block grade, which means just not enough snaps to give him a grade where he's pass blocking. Javonte Barnes, 73.2 pass blocking grade. It's really good. Again, I think it's just a handful of snaps, but good grade. Gavin Sawchuk, 42.1. So again, this is still Gavin Sawchuk is the starter. He's earned the right because of how well he played last year. But I am looking at with a more open mind at this running back room than I did a week ago. And I do think it could be little stuff like that ends up, especially as the offensive line's trying to figure stuff out.
Yep.
So before we get into Houston, I guess, actually, let's do some stock up, stock down. Let's do some stock up, stock down. We said we would do that starting last week. I liked what we did with it last week. There's man, because there's so much stuff we could talk about. I mean, the defense was phenomenal for the most part. They dominated as expected. It really only would have been noteworthy if they didn't dominate. They did. 6 takeaways, fantastic. Special teams, Tyler Keltner, great, awesome. Special teams, good. Let's talk about stock up, stock down. Give me a player, position group. Even we can expand it to position groups. Why the hell not?
Okay.
Stock up. Give me a player or position group whose stock is firmly up after week 1 and heading into week 2.
Can I do 2 different players?
Well, I was going to say, I think we can both go a couple of times.
Okay.
So if you want to do them both at once, that's fine. But just know you'll get another turn.
Okay, I'll just do the first one here then. Taylor Tatum is the easy answer for me. Like that's stock up on that. I'm telling you, that guy's going to be. He's got a chance to be special. So I really like what we saw out of him. Honestly, I think the run that impressed his big run was the best play, his best play of the game, that and the touchdown speed option. But his first run, when the other guys were still kind of struggling to find space, and I think it was either a 6 or an 8-yard run, his first run, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
It looked different, and it was against it was against Temple's better players, if you will. So but it's against the same guys that we were seeing the other Gavin Sawchuk run against and Barnes. But what I saw out of him, I was like, oh yeah, here we go. And he kind of added on to that in the second half. So stock up, Taylor Tatum for sure.
Love the pick. I'm gonna zag a little. Talk about a guy that hasn't been talked about a ton. I mean, he was talked about a little bit, but not a ton. I'm gonna go Grayson Halton.
Love that.
Stock is up. Look, the counting stats are great. I mean, look, 1.5 tackles for loss, 1.5 sacks. I mean, he was genuinely disruptive, and yes, it's against Temple. I wish we could just say that as a editor's note at the beginning, so we don't have to keep saying that. Yes, it's Temple. Having said that, Grayson Halton was a guy who really emerged during the spring, and even with Jaden Jackson and Dominic Williams getting the start, it's clear OU needs other guys. Grayson Halton was one of those guys that OU needs to step up, and thought he was genuinely disruptive. He was a big part of why OU had 6 sacks. They had 5 sacks through the first 3 games last season. So if you want to compare it, OU played, I mean, SMU was good, but that included Arkansas State and Tulsa. So if you want to compare a bad team again in Temple with a 3-game stretch that included 2 bad teams last year, OU had 6 sacks, 5 in the first 3 games last year. That's a big deal. Grayson Halton, Pro Football Focus grade, performance grade, 81.5, second highest on the team, behind Robert Spears-Jennings. Second highest on the entire defense. He played 22 snaps, which is a pretty healthy number of snaps. That to me, like, everybody gets to play against Temple. So even in a blowout like that, if you get 20 snaps or higher, especially on the defensive line, I think that gives a good indication of how you factor in. I think Grayson Halton's going to play. I think he showed that. I think he was great. 80.6 pass rush grade, second highest on the defense. Numbers are there. The basic stats are there. The advanced stats are there. Considering the buzz about him in the spring and early in fall camp, it was the kind of performance he needed to have to kind of prove that buzz is warranted, and I think he did that. Yep. Stock up, Grayson Halton. Who's your next stock up?
Kind of disappointed in both of us for not talking about this guy yet. Tyler Keltner, the place kicker for the Oklahoma Sooners. Stock up.
Stock up.
He's going to lead this team in scoring by the end of the year. Like, I that's not really that much of a not much of a pick there, but yeah, I mean, the guy nailed a 50-yarder on his first attempt. He was 3 for 3. Really, I think what's crazy about this, and I cannot believe we're talking about an Oklahoma team when I say this, but coming out of week 1, you are supremely confident in the defense and special teams and questioning the offense. But special teams was special. That's exactly what I wanted coming into the game. If I'm an Oklahoma fan, he was 3 for 3. He was perfect on points after. And Schmidt actually looked really comfortable as just the kickoff specialist too. Did a good job. So, um, yeah, Tyler Keltner, stock up.
I love the pick because this is one of the things that you can put real stock into. This isn't about the quality of Temple or anything like that. This is, you can measure this based on purely his individual performance. And he comes out and nails a 50-yarder to open his OU career.
Yep.
Then follows it up with a 42-yarder. Look, Zach Schmidt last year kicks of 40 yards or more, 2 of 4. Kicks of 50 yards or more over the last 2 years, 0 of 3. And Tyler Keltner comes out, bangs a 50-yarder, which OU had not done since 2021 and had not done the last 2 years, and comes out and nails a 42-yarder with ease, something that was not a given the last 2 years.
Yep.
So big deal. And even on one of the extra points that looked like there was a little bit of a botch or a mix up with the snap and the hold, and Keltner was still able to deliver it through
in there. And yeah, I saw that.
Loved his interview on Monday. We're not going to get to talk to him very much throughout the year just because we don't get to talk to special teams guys a lot. Early candidate for the best interview on the team. Loved talking to Tyler Keltner on Monday. He was great. It was really interesting. Not only everything he had to say about his work ethic and everything. And Luke Elzinga even brought that up, that like there's so much confidence in Keltner because he has an insane work ethic. But it was also interesting to hear him talk about that he gets nervous when he watches kickers on TV. But when he's on the field, he doesn't get nervous. He was like, I'm way less nervous when I'm on the field than when I'm watching a kicker on TV.
Interesting.
I was like, he's just like us, fans. Yeah. Except if I was on the field, I'd get way more nervous than just watching a kicker on TV. Are you kidding me?
I'd miss the ball. Yeah, I would miss the ball.
If my field goal kicking on CFB 25 is any indication of how I'd actually do at the D1 level on the field, I'd get cut.
Yeah.
First day of spring.
Taking people out in Section 7 over there.
Yeah. I'm going to pick a couple of guys. I'm going to cheat and pick 2 guys, but there's a reason why I'm cheating for stock up. I'm going to pick Robert Spears-Jennings and Kenai Walker. Both in the secondary. Robert Spears-Jennings played 29 snaps. He's going to be, I mean, even with Billy Bowman and Peyton Bowen likely your starters moving forward, provided health, Robert Spears-Jennings is going to play a lot. And he was just really solid. Look, he had the highest Pro Football Focus grade on the team, 90.1. Way bigger. I mean, almost 10 points higher than Grayson Halton, who finished second. 81.9 tackling grade. That's, again, highest on the team, 81.9. Highest coverage grade on the team, 90.9. Had the highest grade in 3 categories for OU. Just what you want to see from a guy heading into his 3rd year and a guy that's going to play a lot of snaps. So really solid game for Robert Spears-Jennings. And then Kenai Walker, which goes into a conversation about how one thing that hasn't been talked about probably enough is that Woody Washington didn't play a snap, which was pretty interesting. Now, Brent Venables chalked that up to he's just a little banged up, a little sore. They held him out as a precaution. And then obviously Gentry only played a handful of snaps. He hurt his shoulder a few weeks ago. I still think those are probably your starting guys when they're both fully healthy. Having said that, Kenai Walker, 40 snaps, tied for the team lead with Billy Bowman in snaps. And a guy that Brent Venables said was the most consistent cornerback in fall camp. Comes out, not only leads the team in snaps, had a 74.2 defense grade, really high number, 81.8 coverage grade, second highest on the team. I think there's real momentum with him. I actually asked Brent about Kenai Walker yesterday, and his answer was really interesting. The attitude from last year to this year is, I mean, he basically said last year it was always something with Kenai. Headache, arms hurting, always something. But this year it's just been different. There's been a change in his attitude. There's been a change in his work ethic. And Kenai Walker, I think, got the ire of some fans last year, and for good reason. He had some really bad moments, but let's not forget that this is still a guy that ranked in the top 10 in snaps last season for this defense, mostly out of necessity. Now he might be in the top 10 in snaps because he's good and they need him.
Yeah.
So this is the take that probably could age the worst, maybe, especially as we get in the SEC play. But stock's up for Kanai Walker right now. He's going to have a role.
Yeah.
So
No, I don't.
that's
I
what
don't
I'd
think
say.
that's a bad. I don't think that's a bad take at all. I mean, the narrative that's changed around him from the Kansas game last year to now is night and day. Um, Huge difference.
Yeah.
And I, I, I don't think you can overstate just how important it is that Brent Venables has come out and said that it's his attitude that's changed, because that tells me his mind's where it needs to be. And if it wasn't, Coach Venables wouldn't come out and say that. So,
Right.
that's big. That's big.
Is it too early to do stock down? Sorry, did you have another stock up? Is it too early
I
to
had
do
one I
stock
was just
down?
going to mention real quick. Kendall Dolby is somebody
Love
that
it.
needs. I mean, he just
Love
kind
the
of
pick.
picked right back up where he left off in the bowl game. Like a guy that is going to be a consistent playmaker, not just in the passing game, but like he was right there in run fits and pressuring the quarterback too. So really, really like what we saw from him.
Is it too early to do stock down? Should we wait till next week to do stock down?
Yes, yeah, because I just it's Temple.
It's Temple. And yeah, no, and a 2 game sample size is literally double the sample size of a 1 game sample size. That's math. I haven't taken a math class since my junior year of high school. That was 11 years ago. Oh God, I'm old. Okay, we'll do stock down next week. This stock up, stock down was brought to you by something. We should get someone to specifically sponsor.
How about your shirt there?
Ooh, it's sponsored by Brujo.
I like it.
How did I not even think of that? Sponsored by Brujo. Hey, we got music on Spotify. Go listen to us on Spotify. Let's go. Brian, before we get to just a few things that we want to watch from the Houston game, they don't sponsor that specific segment of Stock Up, Stock Down, but they do sponsor this podcast as a whole, and that's Babbel. The best way to learn a new language, Brian, it's immersion. That's living where the language is spoken and using it every day. But if that's not in the cards this year, you can still learn a language the second best way, and that's with Babbel. Be a better you in 2024 with Babbel, the science-backed language learning app that actually works. Don't pay hundreds of dollars for private tutors or waste hours on apps that don't really help you speak the language. Babbel's quick 10-minute lessons are handcrafted by over 200 language experts to help you start speaking a new language in as little as 3 weeks. Babbel's designed by real people for real conversations. Babbel's tips and tools are approachable, accessible, rooted in real-life situations, and delivered with conversation-based teaching so you're ready to practice what you've learned in the real world. Here's a special limited-time deal for our listeners. Right now, get up to 60% off your Babbel subscription, but only for our listeners at babbel.com/OU Insider. That is 60% off your Babbel subscription at babbel.com/OU Insider. That's BABBEL.com/OU Insider. Rules and restrictions may apply. Brian, I think we're still a little ways away from a full breakdown of OU's opponent. I think that's going to start next week with Tulane, especially if they give Kansas State a whole lot to fight against. This is a Houston team. Look, last year was a pretty tough one for them in their first year in the Big 12. This year didn't start any better. 27-7 loss against UNLV. They're going to be probably a step up from Temple just by default. This is still a Power 4 team, but this is still a game that OU, I don't even know what the line is, but I'd assume OU
is currently at 30. It opened at 27.5.
Yeah. So again, this is a game that is probably really only noteworthy if OU struggles.
Yeah.
Or if OU only wins by 21 instead of 31. But as far as Houston, Brian, is there anything that stands out to you about Houston? And is there anything from an OU perspective that you're going to be watching heading into this game?
Really, the only name or guy that I pay attention to.
I'm going to interrupt. So sorry. Specify that the game is at 6:45 on Saturday, 6:45 p.m. on SEC Network. Sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead.
No, you're good.
Go ahead.
Donovan Smith is the guy that I'm paying attention to. Uh, he's an NFL player.
He's
At
really
some
good.
point, he will be drafted. He's 6'5", 240 ish pounds. Um, he didn't play well last week at all. Uh, I think he was under 50%. I know he threw two picks. Just wasn't good. And is going to have to be much better for them this year if they're going to have any kind of success. I do think that, if I'm Oklahoma, the big thing for this game for me is going to be uh, where do you go as far as the running game goes? Are you going to control the clock? Are you going to be able to establish those long drives? Like those are things that you have to be able to do in this game. UNLV had 195 yards rushing against Houston last week. So um, I think the big thing for Oklahoma's got to be establishing that run. If they can do that, give you some confidence going into the tougher matchups that are coming. And the other big thing is, what was last week a fluke, or is Oklahoma truly got an issue on its hands on third down? Like offensively, do you have an issue on third down? Because 1 for 12 in practice is not like that's not good. So for you to go 1 for 12 against Temple, I mean that's problematic. That's not a good look. And quite frankly, Jesse, if the defense doesn't give you 6 turnovers in that game,
Yeah.
we're talking about an entirely different level of panic because how many points was it? 30 points off of turnovers for
Hmm.
Oklahoma.
Well, and
Um,
even at OU had their first two drives, they go right down the field. That first drive was a 75 yarder. I should have had the numbers in front of me, but I think they had over 120 yards on their first two drives. Their next 6 drives of the first half, their remaining 6 drives, I think they gained like 70 yards.
that's just rough.
You can't. I
You
mean, it was
can't
bad.
disappear.
It was bad.
Yeah,
It was bad.
yeah. That's I'll tell you if you want to know what that would look like, what that would translate to in an SEC game, go watch Clemson, Georgia. If you don't have offensive success sustained and put points up on the board when you have opportunities, your defense eventually is going to run out of steam. That's exactly what happened to Clemson. Fantastic defensive team. Um, they just ran out of gas, and I think that's the worry you have if you're Oklahoma is you need to find a way to be able to sustain those drives because you can't have it doesn't matter how good your defense is. You could have all Americans at every level. If they're out there for 3/4 of the game, eventually they're going to run out of gas. That's what happens, especially when you have a slate like Oklahoma does. So getting getting uh getting off the field on third down, if you're the offense, not a good thing. Oklahoma
Yeah.
needs to find a way to stay on the field, extend the drive, and they need to do that against Houston.
I've got the numbers here. I just wanted to clarify. I actually put this in my story from after the game about the offense. So first 2 drives, OU had 119 yards. Their final 6 possessions of the first set, they had 103. So
Mm.
they were averaging like less than 17 yards a drive over the next 6. And I think that included like 3 and outs.
That tells me after they got out of their scripted plays and the
Yeah.
offensive line was,
Banged
flipped
up.
around, things just weren't good.
Yeah. And yes, the offensive line is hurt. And yes, they still have things to figure out. And yes, Jalil Fruit got hurt. He should have
Still
done
got to be
better.
better than that.
Got to
Yep.
do better against Temple. So yeah, I think not only just better overall offensive efficiency, and I think I'm just going to be curious about how the snaps shake out at different. I mean, running back, at wide receiver, even defensively. I'm curious about the defensive line, and yeah, like all of that stuff because I think there's still stuff to figure out. I want to see I mean, Seth Luttrell and Jackson Arnold both, and Brent Venables all said it was kind of a vanilla offensive game plan. And I get it. You don't want to show everything on tape for SEC teams to watch. I get it. And it's week 1. They didn't have to do a lot I mean, the offense wasn't great for most of the game and they won by 48. I get it. I don't think OU has the benefit of the doubt to be vanilla the rest of the non-conference. I just don't. They've got too many things to figure out. They've got too many questions to answer at essentially every position group. They've got too many new players. There's too much newness.
Yep.
I think this needs to be more of a concrete full go offensive game plan. And I want to see that include getting Jackson Arnold looking downfield more. I want to see them put the ball in his hands a little bit more. Like, yeah, they need to establish the run, of course. But when they go to throw the ball, I want to see Jackson Arnold do more decision making. I want to see him take chances down the field. I want to see them let him air it out.
Yeah. That's what he's good at.
I think that's the main thing.
That's his bread and butter, if you will. Like that's what makes him stand out from Dillon Gabriel last year was his ability to stretch the field. He's got more than enough arm talent. So, I think you're right. And that's the other thing. There's a balance to everything offensively. If you can't run the ball, you can't throw the ball downfield. And if you can't throw the ball downfield, you're not going to be able to run the ball very well because the defense is going to react to that. So, good point.
You, me, Parker, Thune, and Brandon Drum, our colleagues, will all be in Norman Saturday night, 6:45 to watch Week 2 against Houston. As people who followed along with our coverage last weekend saw, no better place to get all kinds of OU content than OU Insider. We'll have tons of YouTube videos with Brian with your sideline pass. You'll find tons of written content from me. You'll have the Under the Visor pod after the game. You'll have all of the interviews from coaches and players after the game. You'll find that on our YouTube channel. Make sure to head on over to OUinsider.com, become a VIP member today. Make sure to like and subscribe here at our YouTube channel. There'll be tons of content through the rest of the week and beyond for the rest of the season. And until then, Brian, you and I will be back next week to break down everything from Houston and to preview Tulane. We're done with Temple. Thank God. We're done.
It's just Temple.
We're done with Temple. To preview Tulane next week, next Thursday on another episode of the Oklahoma Drill. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll see you next time.